Hello and welcome to part 2 of this SolidWorks tutorial modeling solids. Now in the first tutorial we created this very simple soldering iron using some kind of fundamentals of solid modeling, so revolves, lofts, extrusions. You can pause the video and read them all if you'd like. But for part 2 now we're going to do some appearance editing, some additional features, and we're going to create this updated model from our previous part. So to do that we'll work on appearance editing, we'll work on surface offsetting and copying, we'll work on surface splitting using splitline, linear patterning, and then adding text to our parts. So, without further ado, let's just jump in. So if you've completed part 1 of this tutorial, you will have this soldering iron model. If you haven't, you can either choose to go back to part 1 and do that first, or you can just watch this video. You won't be able to follow along with each step, but you can see the methods that are being used at least. The first step of this part 2 advanced modeling tutorial, we're going to add some detail into this hollow section here. So I'm actually going to use a section view to show you specifically what that looks like. There's this hollow section that we're going to be working on. And I'm going to create on the front plane a sketch. I want to make sure that it doesn't go, I'm going to make a rectangle here, and I want to make sure that it doesn't go through this cable. So I'm actually going to specify off of this cable a distance of, let's say, 2.5 millimeters. Oh, excuse me, 0.25. There we go, because I want it to be within the bottom edge here, but away from this cable. And now I'm going to make an offset from this line here, which is sometimes hard to select. There we go, 1.25 millimeters. There we go. And now I'm going to make this distance 2.5. And this distance doesn't really matter. It just needs to be longer than the edge of the part. So let's just make it 5 millimeters. As long as it goes outside of that edge there. Now, I'm going to create a vertical line down from the center. I'm just going to make it infinite for construction. So now there's a huge, long, infinite line coming down right from the center. It's blue, which means I haven't constrained it properly. There we go. So now it's coincident right in that middle origin. And now I'm going to start with a mirror. I'm going to mirror this rectangle across that line I just created. There we go. And now I'm going to go linear sketch pattern, entities to pattern. I'm going to select those two rectangles I have. I only want one in the x-axis. You can see that they were creating additional ones. But in the y-axis, I want that direction. They're 2.5 millimeters with 2.5 spacing, so 10 is good, 10 millimeter spacing is good. And I'm just going to add as many as I can that will fit this space. So that's too many. 3. Perfect. I'm going to check those off. You can see that these are blue. That's because even though you specified 10 millimeters apart in the sketch, in the linear pattern window, you need to specify it again in the actual drawing or it won't constrain. Now they're all black. I'm going to exit this sketch. I'm going to turn off the section view, excuse me. And now I'm going to go into features, extruded cut, and I'm going to select each of these rectangles. Actually, there's a faster way to do this. I'm going to select the whole sketch, extruded cut. There we go. And now through all both is what I'm going to select. Make sure it goes through everything here on both ways. And now I've done some cuts here. I'm going to do this process again, but this direction now. So that would be the, let's take a look here. That would be the right plane. Sketch. I'm going to make some more rectangles here. I picked surface sweep by accident. Some more rectangles here. There we go. I'm going to go a little bit farther off of this one, let's say 1 millimeter, because the cable isn't a perfect square. I'm going to go 2.5 millimeters down from this, and I'm going to go 2.5 millimeters up from this. Now I know this should make the actual rectangle exactly 2.5 millimeters as well, because I made the distance between these two 10. So the distance between this and this will be 7.5. I know that this rectangle is going to be 2.5 millimeters. And now I'm going to make this distance as well. As long as it's outside of this widest part, that's fine. And then same process as before. I'm going to make a mirror. Just make this line first. Infinite and for construction. For some reason, when I do that, it unselects from this point. So I need to reselect that coincident constraint. And now I'm going to mirror this rectangle across this construction line. Now linear pattern both of them. Entities to pattern, 1, 2. I only want 1 in the x direction, and I want, let's see how many I need. Probably 3 total. 1, oops, 2, 3. They're going in the wrong direction though. 3 is perfect. There we go. And once again, just so that I make sure everything is properly dimensioned, I'm going to add that dimension even though it's already correct. So I'm going to exit this and select the sketch I just created, features, extruded cut, through all both. Sometimes you want to make sure that this actually would cut through, it looks like, this cable, which I don't want to do, obviously. Ooh, it wouldn't. It would not. But even still, I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen by, instead of doing through all both, I'm going to do up to surface. That's a little iffy. I'll just do blind, and I'll do mid-plane, actually. I'll do mid-plane, 25 millimeters, let's say. There we go. And now it'll cut through both directions up to 25 millimeters. That's more than enough. And now we've created this zigzaggy kind of shape down at the bottom here that lets the cable bend. So the next thing I'm going to do is create some grip at the top section of this handle. So I'm going to start with a sketch on the front plane. And I'm going to offset this edge here by 1 millimeter and offset this edge by 1 millimeter, reverse direction. I'm going to draw a line coincident. There we go. So now I've drawn some construction geometry up here, as well as these offsets. This is construction geometry. You can tell because it's dashed. It's hard to see, but it is dashed. And now I'm going to start drawing some lines. One line, 2 lines. I'm going to actually connect these as a rectangle. Oops. There we go. And I am going to specify this distance as 0.5 millimeters. And I'm going to specify this distance, oops, I still have the previous one selected, it's 0.25 millimeters. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into linear sketch pattern. I'm going to select that rectangle I've created. I'm going to do none in the X dimension, but I'm just going to take a look. I'm going to zoom out to see how many look good going down. I'm going to specify this distance needs to be 0.75 because I know there's going to be a 0.5 millimeter gap and then a 0.25 millimeter rectangle. It's going to be the other direction. And let's see how many look good. I'm going to say 30. Yeah, that seems fine. 30 millimeters. I'm going to check that off. And then this is going to be kind of satisfying. Well, first I'm going to make sure these aren't blue anymore by specifying that distance is 0.75. And now I'm going to do something that's pretty satisfying, which is I'm going to go into trim entities. And I am just going to run my cursor, press and hold, all the way down this center line. Oh boy, that's satisfying. All the way down there. Great. You notice I didn't specify the distance out from this point. It doesn't really matter as long as it's completely outside of the, excuse me, as long as it's completely outside of this edge. Now I need to trim away each of these distances in between. And this is a little bit more tedious, a little bit more boring, but it is equally as important. So I'm going to speed this up on the video, and I'll see you in a bit. Okay, welcome back. So I've cut all of these distances in between the rectangles. I also just turned all of the other side into construction geometry. You don't actually need both sides for this to work. You just need one. So I'm going to exit this sketch. And now, I created this axis in the last tutorial right in the center. I'm going to go into Features, Revolved Cut. Instead, I'm going to select the sketch first, Revolve Cut. There we go, and I'm going to select this axis. And check. And now it's created all of those rectangles as little cuts into this part. And you can see that depth into the part there, that 1 millimeter offset that I created. So now we've got that grip up at the top. I'll hide this plane again. And the last thing we're going to do, and kind of the most complex thing, is we're going to put some detail into this bottom handle here, including some text. So the first thing we're going to do is create an offset of this surface. So we're going to go into Surfaces, Offset Surface, and we're going to make, you can see it says Offset Surface. I'm going to set this to 0 millimeters, and it changes to Copy Surface. So now I've got two bodies in my model. I have this whole big body that I created, and if I hide it, I have this surface that I've just created by doing a surface offset. Now, the next thing we're going to do is cut this surface into a third, because the part I have, the soldering iron I have, has three identical rotated texts on it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to create a sketch. I'm going to bring back the solid. We're going to create a sketch on the top plane, and it's going to be 3 lines. 1, that's going to be vertical, and it's going to be construction, 2, and 3. Now I'm going to specify this distance as 120, or angle, excuse me, and I'm going to specify this angle as 120. Now I'm going to turn this into construction geometry, and these edges don't really matter as long as they're outside of the total distance, total bounds of the solid, or of, in this case, the surface. I'm going to hide this solid. We don't really need this very much anymore. And I'm going to go into split line is what I want. I'm going to select these lines, this sketch I just created, as the selection, and I'm going to select this surface as the surface to cut. And I'm going to click. There. All right, so I've split this into a third. And a 2/3 section. And now I'm going to go front plane, sketch, and I'm going to convert this third section onto the plane. So you can see it's now on the midplane. And now I'm going to hide this edge. I'm going to start with vertical lines coming from the top down, and then I'm going to create some offsets from this line, and this is for text guidelines. So I'm going to create offset bidirectional. They're going to be 2.5 millimeters both directions. That looks great. I'm going to make them all for construction. And the reason for this is when I hit text, I'm going to type in Weber, or Weller, excuse me. That is the name of my brand of soldering iron. I'm going to select this line as the guide curve, and I'm going to flip this. I'm going to flip this. I'm going to bring it to the left, and I'm going to bring this down. And the reason for this 2.5 offset is I'm going to unselect Use Document Font. I'm going to specify a font that I found looks pretty close to the font on my soldering iron, and I'm going to specify the height as 5 millimeters. There we go. So now I can make sure that it's right in between these bounds. I can avoid designing within these bounds because that's where the text is going. I'm going to bring this up a little bit with spaces. Great. Oh, and I hit escape. I hit escape, so I did it all. I undid everything I just did. See you in a bit. Okay, I hit check mark this time, so now it's here. And I'm going to create a line here, from here to there. I'm going to dimension it a little bit. Let's make this 6 millimeters. Let's make this distance 5. And then I'm going to create some, turn off smart dimension. I'm going to create some tangent arcs. First from this point over to the center here. Oop, it didn't actually connect. I'm going to have to make sure it connects with that center line. Coincident. And one more up here. I'm also going to make sure that this is exactly the direction I want it to be finishing. And to do that, I'm going to create a line here, make sure it is horizontal, and then make it tangent. Whoa! Pull this down. That looks better. Pull this down. That looks better. And I'm going to do the same thing down here. From this point over, make sure it's horizontal, and make sure these are tangent. And this needs to be over here. And drag it way down. Actually, to specify how far down it's going to be, I'm going to make an actual dimension from that all the way up to here. I'm going to make it, let's say, 35 millimeters. That looks good. And I'm going to make this dimension 10. That looks fine. Great. Now, I'm going to make sure that this is construction and that this line up here is also construction. And now I'm going to mirror these 3 lines. Mirror entities. Oh, okay, I'm going to pick mirror first. It tried to automatically mirror across the straight line that it found, which isn't good. Pick these 3, mirror about this line. There we go. Perfect. Now I'm going to try and trim away some of this top section. I'm going to keep it as construction. There we go. And I don't need any of this either. Great. So now I've got a bottom section and some lettering. And that is what I want. I'm going to make sure that these are solid as well. They are solid. I'm going to exit. I'm going to bring back the surface body. Or excuse me, the solid body is what I want. And I'm going to go into split line. I'm going to specify the sketch as the selection for the split line, and this face as the selection for face. And I'm going to split that face with that line. Now you'll notice this went both directions. That's not what I want. I want it to only split in one direction. I don't want Weller in reverse. So I'm going to specify single direction. And I'm going to pick the right direction. That way. There we go. There. So I've split this surface into Weller and this curve here. I should note that I'm not sponsored by Weller. It's just what I happen to buy. It was cheap and it works for me. And now I'm going to circular pattern it. So I'm going to circular pattern, features and faces. I'm going to select split lines 4. For the direction, I'm going to select that curve. I'm going to make sure there's 3 equal spaced across 360 degrees. Check mark. There we go. Now I've split this bottom face into 3 Wellers. Now there's one more thing I'm going to do. First I'm going to hide this axis and this sketch, whatever it is. And I'm going to create a plane, reference plane offset from there, 10 millimeters down here. And I'm going to do one more split. I'm going to do intersection. I'm going to use this plane 7. Yep, that was already selected. And I'm going to select these faces around here. Because that's also part of the design of my soldering iron. There. I've split this face into two, and I'm going to hide this plane. So we've finally done all the splitting and cutting and solid modifications that we need to do. Now the last thing we're going to do is appearance editing. And we're going to start by just changing the whole appearance of the model. I'm going to go into appearance, and there's two options for this. That's taking a while to load. You can either just select a color over here, or you can actually go into appearance and select, let's say I want it to be rubber, and I want it to be matte rubber here. You can select an actual material. There's obviously lots in the library. That looks good to me. I'm going to check that. And now that I've selected the base material to be this matte rubber, I can go in and change some of the surfaces. So for example, for the actual metal tip, I'm going to go select them all. I'm going to go into appearances. For the faces that I just selected, and I'm going to select metal. Let's make it aluminum, polished aluminum. Let's make it polished aluminum. And check. There we go. So you can see that's a nice contrast to that black. I'm also going to select, this is why we split this face, so that we could select each of these. This is going to take a little bit of time, but each of these individual split areas and change the color of them as well. I'm just going to jump to finishing this. Okay, so there we go. I've selected them all. I'm going to go into the appearance menu over here, red gloss plastic, and there we go. I've turned them all into this red plastic. And I'm just going to do that same thing for these faces up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Appearance, the face, plastic, high gloss, red. And done. So that is the end of this tutorial. We did some linear patterning down here in the cuts. We did some cutting here. We did some slicing up at the top here to make some ridges. And we did some coloring, some appearance modeling. And we created this nice looking soldering iron. So I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and a comment if you do. You can visit my website at blackfordengineering.com for more info about me. And I hope you have a great day. Thanks very much.